Hey, thank you all for coming today. You can probably still hear my voice without the headset, but I am told to keep my voice at a reasonable level here. So thank you guys for joining us for 2481 doing HCX. This is a fun platform that I think working with for the last few years, and I think it's a really cool system. So I'm really looking forward to having some fun today, walking through the lab. So we're going to go through some intros, jump into a little bit about the product, how we built the lab, and then we'll jump into the lab itself. I'm going to be going a little bit off script from the lab itself, so you can either follow along with what I'm doing, and I'll give you the key notes on what I'm doing, or you can just follow the lab either way. Make this interactive. Anytime you have questions, let us know. We're here to help you out and help you get started. So I think I covered the, so I've been with VMware for 8.5 years, coming up to 9 now, working with our newer technology. So one of the big things I'm working on right now is VMC on Equinix. So it's really fun getting to see us putting everything together to bring something to market. And we just love hearing feedback. So one of the other things that both me and Uma work on is HCX Plus, the new SaaS version of this product. And again, we love hearing feedback, love having conversations of how you're using it, what you want to do. So please let us know.
Hi everyone, my name is Uma Kaladi. Like Alex said, we both work on this cloud incubation team, which is the emerging technologies, and all of those do use HCX, so we have quite a bit of experience with this. So I'm going to start off with an overview of HCX. So HCX stands for Hybrid Cloud Extension. What started off as a migration tool to move VMs from point A to point B, that is still a very large use case, but it's kind of grown to more than that at this point. So one of the better capabilities that we'll talk about today is that you have these, it's more about application mobility as well. So now you can kind of place where things make the most sense to in the environments that are most optimized for those things, rather than just move, and you can move them whenever you want kind of thing, rather than just moving it once and leaving it there. And another cool feature that you'll see in this lab too is that you can migrate from Hyper-V to vSphere, things of that nature. So there's a lot more capabilities kind of folded into HCX now. The key benefits of HCX are obviously that you can migrate quicker and optimize where things are ending up. So obviously, the faster things happen, the faster you can get innovating, using those workloads, and just get going. And these are the main feature categories that we're going to be talking about today. So obviously the workload mobility. These are the migration types that we're going to be talking about today. So, and in the lab. So we have cold migration, bulk migration, vMotion, replication assisted vMotion, OS assisted migration, and mobility groups, things of that nature. Everyone's pretty familiar with vMotion. Those are the migration types that are powered on while they move. Bulk migration allows you to move more than one VM at once. Replication assisted vMotion is kind of in between, and there's more detail in the lab about that. And then we have WAN optimization. So there's features built in itself to make sure that the bandwidth isn't taken up during these migration plans. And hybrid connectivity allows you to kind of have the network extended, layer 2 extensions, things of that nature.
So one of the cool features of the enterprise feature set of HCX, which comes with our VMC portfolio too, so think VMC on AWS, VMC on Dell, and the new product coming out to market, VMC on Equinix, is OS assisted migration. This is where we're going to install a little tiny module inside the VM sitting on KVM or Hyper-V, and then we can then grab it using HCX, pull it in, and make it a vSphere VM. So if you think about those migrations, whether it's like an acquisition, you're buying something, the company uses Hyper-V, now you can go script and install these agents and then pull them over. We have that in the lab. You can do it live, or we have an iSIM, which is a recorded one. One of the benefits of the iSIM is it goes a little bit faster. Doing it live does take about 26 minutes, so it can be a little time intensive. One of the other things that we can do with HCX is we can pair this with another system such as vRealize Network Insight, or if you have other data you can upload it. And what that allows us to do is create mobility groups. And when we're doing these mobility groups, we can then say, okay, here are a group of VMs that should be migrated together. And when we're migrating them together, we make sure that like the database that they're communicating with can actually access it, and they're not hitting something that's going back over the WAN and back and forth. So it's a nice way of keeping things together. In the lab, I'll also show you a spot where you can see the status of the mobility group all at once. So a little bit about the lab that we built here. So everything we're talking about here is nested. We have two sides, a site A and a site B. Now to simulate some of the environments that HCX excels in, we have Site A is an older environment, 6.7, different single sign-on domain than Site B. Site B is going to be one of the newer environments, that's vSphere 8. So it kind of goes to show you we're going from different versions and going from something older to newer and different single sign-ons, things like that. These are the modules in the lab. But what I'm going to recommend for this lab is we're going to shake it up a little bit. We're going to jump in, do a migration right away. I mean, that's what we're all here for. We want to see a migration, we want to get going, and I'm actually going to do two migrations together. We're going to do a web server and also just another server that's going to do some NSX features later on. We'll walk through that together. Then we'll go through the mesh setup, the site pairings, all that kind of stuff, and then we can then go from wherever we want. My recommendation is we do the OS-assisted migration. We do the migration from KVM over to vSphere. Yeah, so we're going to get into the lab now. So feel free to go into the lab if you want to, or you can wait until I'm done. I'm going to walk through. I just have my window expanded just so it's a little bit easier to see, but this is the same lab that you're going through. Manuals on the right side, you can see it over here, and if you want to, you can just use the arrows to move back and forth, and if you need to, you can do the table of contents to jump around. I've done this lab once or twice, so I'm not going to use the manual when I'm walking through this. So here we have Site A. So I just open up a new tab, here's the link for Region A, and then I'm looking through here. So if I'm on vCenter, you can see here in my summary, I'm going to scroll down a little bit, it's version 6.7. Just to make sure there's no funny business, if I go down to the host, this is also version 6.7. You can see a set of VMs here, a 3-tier app, a web server, an app server, and then this is our database server. This is another server that we're going to use and kind of just highlight some NSX features when we're migrating them over. Let's go to our destination. So the second tab I have open, and this is Region B. I'm just going to log in. And then in this one, I'm going to show you that this is vCenter and vSphere 8.0. So when I come in here, again, I'm going to click on the vCenter. Here we can see it's 8.0. And then if I click on the ESXi host, again, I can see this is version 8.0. You can see here another set of VMs. All these ones labeled HOL, those are VMs that are deployed as part of the service mesh. So we have them pre-deployed for you, just because it takes a little bit of time, and that's not really the fun part that we're trying to do. So let's go back over here. The 3-tier app I was telling you about is Web01A is the front end of this. And you can see over here the URL that we're going to access. Let's just open up a new tab. And we're going to go click on this one that says Customer Database. Now, I usually kid around that this is an extremely in-depth and complicated database, but this is really simple database giving you a list of data. You can search off of it, and it'll shorten this list. This is just to show you a 3-tier app and work. We're hitting the web interface, it's going to an application server, which then passes off the query to the database server. And this allows us to just kind of see that traffic. So this is going here. Next thing I'm going to do is let's ping this. I'm going to open up a terminal window. And I'm going to ping web01A. And I'm just going to let that go. We're going to forget about this for a few minutes and let it go in the background. Next thing I'm going to do is let's go look into this core A. And I'm going to launch the web console. So I am in a VM that's on Site A in vCenter A. Site A does not have access to NSX or any part of NSX, so it can't communicate to some things. If I go to Site B, I want to click on this cloud storage. This is to simulate something in your environment that's behind NSX, protected by NSX. You can only access this VM if you're part of the NSX network. So 192.168.221.10, let's try to ping that. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, I expect this to fail because we're not on NSX at Site B. We're going to migrate this over. We'll make some changes to using MON, Mobility Optimized Networking, and talk more about it, and then we'll see this kind of go to the next step. So I'll pause there for a second. If there's any questions, let us know. Otherwise, I'll jump into HCX. Okay. So in here, there's a few ways to get into HCX. You can click on the vSphere client and then go down to HCX, or you can do the menu, go down to HCX. We want to just get into here. There's a few tabs here. We're not going to go into a lot of detail on the tabs, but I want to go into migration, and then we'll jump into here. We'll circle back to the tabs in a few minutes. Now I'm going to click on the migrate button. This is going to pull up the migration interface. You see two options at the top. So every service mesh you create, it'll create a different option so you know what you're dealing with. And there's two options, the non-vSphere inventory, so that's going to be coming from Hyper-V, and then this other one's going to be vSphere to vSphere. So we're going to click on the vSphere to vSphere for now, and then we're going to choose the VMs we want. So we did Core A and Web 01A, and we're going to click Add. This is then going to populate that, and then we're going to come up here in the top right, and we're going to give it a name. There's some questions we want to answer now about where do we want to place this VM as we do the migration. So I'm going to click this drop-down menu. When we're doing this in our test environment, there's not a lot of options to choose. In your environment, there may be a couple more, and you can limit what options you have when you're using this. You only have access to certain folders, certain hosts, things like that. So when I choose this, my next question is going to be the VMDK format. I always like doing thin provisioning. That's kind of the recommendation these days. So I choose thin, but you can do it as anything you want. The migration profile. Uma talked about this a little bit. 3 options that show up in this dialog box. Live vMotion. Think of a normal vMotion where you're going, the VM's going to be constantly running the entire time. We're migrating the memory and the CPU. Same thing like you're moving from one host to the other host in the same cluster, except we're going to be going from one environment to another environment, even if they're across a WAN, different parts of the country. A bulk migration, we're going to migrate everything. I think it's 250 at a time. You can migrate them over, and then it'll reboot. So it'll replicate the data. Once the data's over, it'll reboot that machine on the other side, and you're good. So there's going to be a little bit of downtime there, but it comes up. Replicated assisted vMotion is going to be a merging of the two of those. We're going to replicate all the data, and then once the data for our VMs migrated over, we're going to then do a vMotion for that one VM, memory and CPU. Now when we're doing a vMotion, we're limited to 1 at a time right now. So the bulk will go faster because you can do a bunch at a time. I think it's 8. And then a replicated assisted vMotion will at least replicate the data, and then you're just triggering the memory and RAM over it later on. So we're going to do a live vMotion for this one. Now, one of the options here, when you're doing large scale, you have 100 VMs in this group, you can actually say start this Friday at 8 p.m. and end Saturday at 8 a.m. or something like that. It'll automatically cancel any migrations that are still in progress. So it's a nice way of boxing it in. You don't have to really make sure you're paying attention Friday night to get it started. You just have to log in and check the progress. For this, we're going to cancel. And then I like expanding these, verify everything looks okay, make sure the network's here. Shouldn't be a problem, and it'll tell us if there is during the verification. I just like checking. I'm going to click validate. We're going to see some errors here because storage is tight. That's okay in this environment. We can ignore that. We're going to click go. So now it's going out, setting up the migration, getting everything queued, and getting everything ready to go. This is going to take about 4 to 6 minutes. And one of the things I just want to show you before we pause and switch over to you is that this is the environment. You can see the 2 VMs I'm migrating. In the top right-hand corner here, there is this, looks like a chart. We're going to click on that chart. And this is going to show us status and details about the migration. And what I mean by that is, think about you're doing a migration for 100 VMs. Well, now you have 100 VMs there, and you can see where they are, how many are migrated, how many in progress. and not that we want to focus on this, how many have errors, right? How many we need to go back and take a look at it. So this gives you a good overview of everything that's happening. It's a little silly when we're talking about 2 VMs or 1 VM in a test environment. We can just monitor by ourselves. It's really focused on the bigger environments and bigger migrations. And we have customers that we work with on a regular basis that we're talking about doing multiple thousands of VM migrations a month, where this really comes in handy. So I'm going to pause here for a second. If there's any questions, let us know. Okay, so what I'm going to say is you guys can get into your lab. While this migration's happening here, you can start doing your migration. And if you want to, you can migrate both VMs like I did, Web 01A and Core A. And then do that. Or if you want, you can just do the one that's in the manual, and we can break it up like that. Any questions, physically raise your hand and one of us will come over to you. So you can see here in our lab here, which is really nice, you can see that we have finished the 2 migrations that we did, both of them completed. So let's go and do a couple of checks. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's go take a look at that ping. Okay, this ping is going. Let's end this. You can see here I had 3 errors. So doing all this migration, lost 3 pings. That's pretty good in my mind if you're kind of migrating between different environments. And you have to think that's also it relearning the Mac and the new switches and that. So that looks good. Let's go to the console that we had for Web A. We're now disconnected. Well, that kind of makes sense, right? We moved it from one vCenter to the other vCenter. Let's go into the inventory view. Whoop, wrong vCenter. Let's go to the inventory view, the hosts and clusters. You can see here Web 01A is no longer here and Core A is no longer here. Okay, that makes sense. We migrated them over. Let's go to the second vCenter. You can now see Core A is here. If we're paying attention, that's the same IP address, so that's good. And then Web 01A, again, the same IP address. So we're able to migrate this over, keeping the same IP address. Everything looks good. Now let's go to the customer database. Remember, we were querying this. I didn't do anything. I haven't changed any IP addresses, any DNS queries. So let's just delete this query, click apply, and it's going to return back everything. Let's do another search. And it's coming back with the data. So I moved this from one vSphere environment to a different vSphere environment, from 6.7 to 8.0. Everything keeps on working, no interface, no issues with the customers, clients interacting. Everything just keeps on going. So that's a good experience. Now let's look at Core A. I'm going to launch the web console. You can see here, I'm still not pinging that response. So again, this still makes sense. Let's go take a look. So this VM has an IP address. We're trying to ping cloud storage. Cloud storage is part of the NSX network. It's protected behind that. So let's go back into HCX. And what I'm going to do here is called mobility optimized networking. Right now, when we extended this network, anything in Site A that we migrated on this network to Site B looks like it's on the same IP address, looks like it's using the same network, except it's routing everything back to Site A and using the gateway on Site A. What we're going to do now in a second, I'm going to click on network extension. I'm going to say, okay, this VM that we just moved to Site B, we want NSX to pay attention to what we're doing, and we want NSX to route the traffic if it knows about the end. So if NSX doesn't know about it, it'll still send everything over to Site A, but if it knows about it, for instance, another NSX network that it controls, it's going to route that traffic automatically. So when we come in here, we're going to expand this. We can see mobility optimized networking is green, and it's enabled. We're going to scroll down. We see 2 VMs. I'm going to check these 2 VMs, and then down here I can see router location, and I'm going to select HCX 01B, which is the router for Site B. I'm going to click submit. This is saying, hey, when we do this, we may drop a ping or two because the routing point is going to change. We're going to click OK. And we're going to watch this go. It should only take a couple of seconds, but it's kind of going to walk through here 10%. Now the other option, instead of doing it the way that we just did it, we can expand this, and we can change the router here individually per 1 VM, and then just set it to 1 VM at a time. Just usually, people are going to be doing this in bulk, so you're going to want that option. We can see here, it went green, everything went complete, so that looks good. Now let's go back to Core A. Now that we've said, NSX, you control the routing for this VM, and you can route to other networks you know about, it's now routing to that endpoint here. So you can see how we're able to now say, instead of going all the way back to A to route, and then A doesn't know how to get to this VM, NSX routes and then keeps it over there. So let me pause there for a second. Any questions? Anything you want to talk about on what we just went through? So the question was, if we selected one of the individual VMs, where's the submit button? If I come down here and choose, like I switch this back to HCX Connect A, the submit button up here is now doing that there. So it's the same submit button for both of them. It's just how you want to select it individually. So you could actually go down here if you had multiple meshes set up and things like that, you can switch it out. A layer 2 extension can actually be extended across 3 sites. The original site, a site B, and a site C, so you can kind of do like a little triangle. There's no other questions. I'm going to go into the site mesh and setup for a little bit, review that, and then we'll pass it back off to you so you guys can walk through a little bit. So here I'm going to click on site pairing. What we're doing in site pairing is we're just saying 2 sites, you communicate with each other. There's not a lot of information, it's just that we have communication channels open. Where we're really going to do everything is in this interconnect. And there's going to be a couple different areas here. We're going to go to the compute profiles first, and we're going to walk through the compute profiles. You're going to create a compute profile for every site that is connected to this. You can see the summary here. What I'm going to do is click the edit button. It's going to be a very similar interface if we were going to create it from scratch, except everything will be pre-populated for us. It makes it a little bit easier walking through. So we're going to click continue. Here is the set of services that we are licensed for that we can check off. So if you wanted to say, I don't want to do OS assisted migration in this one, I'm going to uncheck that, the checkbox go away. Obviously I want to leave this alone, so I'm going to leave that there. We're going to click continue, and then we're going to say, where are we going to deploy these HCX services? So you have a drop-down menu, you can select a different one. Again, in a demo environment, we don't have a lot of options to choose, but this is where you would go in and say, this is where I want you to deploy. Click continue. Again, more resources for the deployment, a data store here, and then we can put it into a folder if we want. We can also do reservations for the management appliances if we want to. Continue. We're going to go through a set of networking resources. In this lab environment, for the sake of keeping everything small and easy, we use the same network profile for everything, but in your environment, you may have different network profiles, and you can do that. Now, if I do a drop-down menu here, you can see if the network doesn't exist, I can click Create Network Profile, and then go from there and create it on the fly. I'll show you another spot in a second where you can pre-populate these beforehand, so it's easier to do. One thing I do want to point out here is you can see that we have 7 free IPs. I would recommend you have more IPs than what you need for your deployment. And what that's going to help us with is like lifecycle management, things like that. So we're deploying a new appliance. We deploy a new appliance with a new IP, then we can turn the other one off. If you don't give us enough IPs, we actually have to tear down the old appliance, deploy the new appliance, give it the new IP, which means lifecycle events will take a little bit longer. Probably not a problem for just the core HCX service mesh, but when you're thinking about layer 2 extension, you want that layer 2 extension, especially if you're using it, you want it to be up as much as possible. One of the things we can do that's been introduced about 1.5 years ago is we can do high availability for those layer 2 extensions as well. So there'll be 2 appliances deployed, and when we do a lifecycle event, we're going to tear down one appliance, deploy the new one in its place. When that one's up, we'll cut the traffic over, and then we'll shut down the old appliance and then deploy a second appliance as the HA pair. So it's a quick process. You'll lose a ping or two while it cuts over, but it's pretty straightforward. So here are those other network profiles that we're talking about. So you can do the uplink, your vMotion, your replication. If there's one for OS assisted migration, this network has to be able to reach those agents that we install. And then this is the one for network extension. On the destination side, you need NSX and you need NSX networks in order for that to work. Next thing it's going to do is create a list of what it's going to do. The firewall rules it needs, what's communicating with what, all that kind of information. So this is helpful when you're trying to put together your ask for security or networking, you need to open up a firewall rule, things like that. I'm going to cancel out of this so I don't make any changes. Then I'm going to go to my service mesh. So that compute profile that I just did, you do that on both sides, a source and destination. And then in the service mesh, this is where we join the two together. So we come in here and join them. We're gonna do edit again. First thing we're gonna do is, what are the two sites we're connecting, okay? These, I can't show the drop-down menu because it's already pre-selected in here, but you'd have the options of any service meshes you see, and you're gonna connect them, and then what profile you want. So you can see the profile source, the profile destination, and then we're gonna click continue. Now here we see the services that are aligned between the two of them. Here are all the ones we can use. If for some reason we say we don't want to do bulk migration for this, we can turn it on and off here. Again, we're going to leave it on. One of the things you'll see here is the WAN optimization. WAN optimization can provide, it's something we're in the ballpark of like 2 to 3 times your extra bandwidth when you're going between sites. Really good if you're going over a WAN. This environment, since it's a demo environment, is on the same host. We don't really have to worry about WAN optimization, so we're going to turn it off. One of the reasons for that is to conserve resources. It uses a lot of CPU in order to do the dedupe compression and turn it on. Same thing, if you were migrating between 2 clusters in your same data center, I probably wouldn't recommend turning on WAN optimization. I definitely would want it if you're doing over anything that's a smaller WAN link or a connection for one reason or the other. So I'm going to click continue. Now you can override some things. For some reason you want to override the uplinks here, you can do that here. This is where we start talking about every network appliance can handle so many layer 2 extensions. So what you want to do is if you want, say, 15 networks you want to extend, you're going to need 2 appliances. This is where you can increase or decrease that account. So right now we only need 1, I'll decrease it. Click continuing. These 2 are ways of helping engineering the traffic. So we can do, they'll monitor the flow, try to figure out if there's anything they can do to reduce the packet fragmentation, that kind of stuff. And they can also create multiple flows, even if they're going over the same path. So that way if something happens, they have flows that are already open. It's easier to pick up the stream and replicate stuff. This is also really helpful if you have multiple paths to get from A to B. It can open up paths over different paths. Click continue, give it a name. Again, I'm going to cancel this, kind of go from there. Now we have a service mesh ready. The next step here is to go to the layer 2 extension. The layer 2 extension here, we'll be able to, I already have the network extended, so we won't be able to extend a new one, but I can walk you through what that process would look like. If I click on extend networks, this is going to give you a list of networks that that are going to be available. One of the things I really like about this interface is it actually shows you why you can't extend one. So right now there's nothing here. So if it says here is a couple different tags, hide without extensions, hide without VMs, and hide ineligible. So here, if I uncheck this one, it'll show me networks. Sorry, this one I want to undo. Ineligible, and it says why is it ineligible? It's an untagged network, okay? So in order to do a layer 2 extension, it has to be a tagged network. And then the other ones here is it can't be a trunk, and it can't be used in a service mesh. So you can't extend the network of the network that the appliances are on, so just keep that in mind when you're designing things and pulling them out. If we could extend one of these, we just check it and hit next, verify the IP addresses that we're extending, what the default gateway is, and we'll complete. This takes about maybe 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes to complete. It's pretty quick. Pause there. Any questions? Anything that comes up from what we just reviewed? Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pause for another, I'm going to pause for another 10 minutes, 15 minutes, let you go through module run, read through it, the service meshes. If you have any questions, let us know. If you don't want to do module 1, you don't want to read this, feel free to jump into the OS Assisted Migration, the Hyper-V to KVM portion of it, and do that. Or ask us any questions, okay? If anybody needs more time, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to jump back in here. I'm going to give you some pointers that we just talked through, and then we'll jump into that OS Assisted Migration option. So just having a great conversation. Honestly, I think I need to add a slide or 2 to this deck to kind of go through some of the design phases that we do when we're doing HCX. So when you're doing layer 2 extension, some things you want to keep in mind, the limitation is 4 to 6 gigs going through those appliances. So think about that for your traffic, what's going through them. So one of the things we were just talking about, you don't want your backup solution going over a layer 2 extension. It's just going to saturate that appliance, you're going to push a lot through there, you're not really going to get anything out of it. So it should be relatively easy, add another network, have it go the normal way to do your backup solution, and then leave that layer 2 extension for VM traffic that's going from point A to point B. You can scale appliances for how many networks you have. So I think it's 9 or 10, depending on which solution you're doing, per appliance. Also 4 to 6 gigs per appliance. So depending on your bandwidth, you may want to deploy more appliances to get that out there. So some small things to keep in mind if you're looking at that part. Historically, layer 2 extensions were only there for a migration. Point A to point B, then you tore it down. These days, they're really there longer term, if you want, as a mobility solution, where you can leave it up and running. Again, we have the high availability, you can deploy multiple appliances to make sure there's redundancy. And then one of the things that's happening now is, say it takes you a month to re-IP all your VMs. Well, you set up a layer 2 extension, maybe you leave it up for 2 years. A lot of customers we talk about, in those 2 years, something else is going to trigger an event. Your VMs that are going to be retired, you're going to deploy new ones, those new ones get deployed into new networks, or something else happens. That service is now being replaced by a SaaS service or something like that. So there's other ways they might get just naturally cycled through, and then maybe you just have a couple of lingering VMs, or they just naturally take care of themselves and you can tear down the layer 2 extension. But it's definitely some options there. It's a very powerful tool. I think it's one of the things I love about the solution, but there are some design considerations you want to take into account. Okay, so I'm going to jump in to the lab again. We're going to do the OS assisted migration. For the sake of time, I'm going to do the iSIM, but like I said, you can do this live in the lab too. So for the iSIM, I'm going to click on the manual. I'm going to go to the table of contents. I'm going to go down to migrating from Hybridity to vSphere, and I'm going to click on the second one here, and then we're going to go over, it says start the interactive simulation. So this comes over, there's going to be some bars that tell you where you're going to do. I'm going to walk through this. You can walk through yourself, or again, you can do it live in the lab. Do it live in the lab, you might not have time to finish it, but you're more than welcome to start and see how it goes. We are looking at the console for Hyper-V. So we're going to do connect to this VM. We're going to log in, and this is just logging in as the user Ubuntu. We're going to do an IP config here and see what our IP address. It's 151.61. So 192.168.151.61. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to PuTTY. We're going to verify that we can connect to SSH to that machine. And we're going to do an IF config, verify we're connected to the same VM. Again, 192.168.151.61. Now let's go into vSphere. One of the things I want to show you here is there is no tab, there's no Hyper-V VM here. We're going to switch to the other VM, the other vCenter. There's no Hyper-V VM here. We're going to go back and we're going to go into HCX. This next part is going to be very similar to what we just did. So here we can see the site pairing. 2 sites are able to communicate, nothing exciting. It is exciting, but I mean, we've already done it, right? The interconnect, we can see the service mesh, everything's connected here, that looks good. We just want to verify the network extension is still up and running. It is, that's good, extension's complete. We can expand this, that looks good. Now let's get into the migration. So we're going to do the same thing, we're going to migrate. Those 2 tabs we saw, we're going to do the other tab at the top here, where it's going to say non-vSphere inventory. Then we're going to give it a name. And then down here, we're going to check off Hyper-V Core A. We're going to click Add. Same thing, we're going to say, where do we want to place this VM? So we're going to choose these options. Same like we were doing earlier. And then I'm also going to do the same, select thin provisioning. Here, you can see the OS assisted migration. And then we're going to extend this. One of the things here, we talked about earlier, the network. Well, here, we don't know what the network is because we don't know this VM, right? So we're going to click in here, we're going to see a list of networks. And here we're going to search for layer 2 extension, L2E. And then we're going to check this one off. And let's select, and then we're going to validate. This is going to go through, we're going to say go. And then now it's going to start going. So these are different groups. I'm just going to select, minimize these groups. And then here we can see this OSAM is migrating. You can see it's the magic of science here. In technology, it's migrating, it's complete, this is great. So now let's go back to Hyper-V, the console. You can see here the VM is powered off. So as part of this, when we finish the migration, we shut that VM down so it's not running in two places. Let's go back to vCenter. We're going to go through to the inventory, and then we can see here that VM exists. And here we can see it's the same IP address, 192.168.151.61. Let's go into PuTTY at the bottom. We're just going to PuTTY and SSH back into that VM. Log in with the same username and password. And now we're there. We'll do an ifconfig, verify everything looks good, and now we're there. One thing to keep in mind is because this is coming from a Hyper-V system, or again, if it was KVM, it would be the same. The VM is being rebooted as part of that process. So there's going to be a time for it to reboot, come back up. I always estimate around 5 minutes, depending on circumstances and that. But now we have that VM is running as a vSphere VM in vCenter. So there's a nice way of just kind of consolidating some of that infrastructure from like maybe an acquisition or something like that and bringing it in. So timing-wise, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to let you guys complete the lab, walk through. Feel free to jump around to any module you want. You can try to do this one, either the iSIM or do it live. Any questions, we're here to help you. But I'm going to go off mic here and just kind of hover until you guys are ready, okay? Thank you.